Hi.
No. Can
Can you
you?
hear me okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I have my mic in my office if you want to grab it.
Uh,
But
I should have brought mine. I brought my light because my office gets so dark once the sun
yeah,
has passed over. So I brought my light, but I also have like a little mic like yours.
that's
But
smart. That's smart. I didn't have it at home. So, you know,
yes.
but I feel like I'm very bright. Hold on. I'm gonna get some mood lighting instead
Get
here.
get yourself situated.
Mhm. So I feel like it was a spotlight at the Eastern Bloc.
Thunderstorm. I'm
Right.
so the way that I have unironically been saying that since I finished this book this weekend. Anytime I'm feeling any type of like intense emotion, I'm just like, that's
That's
just perfect.
funny. You should have added that into our meeting
Yes.
today.
Hi, Travis.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. We are so excited for this. I can't tell
Oh,
you.
me too. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Oh, I'm so glad. We'll give people just a few more minutes, but I'm Allison Frenzel, one of the co-owners of Fabled. And tonight I have, which Kai also has my name. I don't know, do you see on underneath?
That's so weird because
That's
I
okay.
did put my name, but
Oh,
my
I
name
see
is Kai.
that.
Yes.
Right.
So yes, we are not
Okay.
the same person. But we both arrived to a meeting today early and we just kept talking about things. And then we had written our questions. And I was like, I don't think there's been a time where we have had too many questions. And we will probably not be able to get to all of them.
Okay. I'll try to be succinct.
Yes. I do want to ask you before we start, are you Gen X or millennial or what are you?
I think I'm tail end Gen X.
Okay,
Yeah.
me too. Me too. I
Okay.
ascribe only to the good things of each, not the bad.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll borrow from millennials where when it feels right. But no, I
Yes,
think
yes. But
technically
we
I'm in,
will be disrespectful like a Gen X person for sure and not
right.
care.
Yeah, that's right. We'll roll our eyes at the millennials.
Yes. It's
Yeah, I'm
so
on the opposite end of that as a Gen Zer, but I'm also a
Oh
customer.
boy,
So
okay.
again, I was like, I'll also roll my eyes at my older sibling millennials, but I'm
Okay. We can all
definitely,
agree who the villain is here.
yep.
yeah.
And that's why they're not in this conversation tonight. I'm just
Right.
kidding. If anybody's
Yes,
joining
we
the
said
chat.
no millennials allowed. Um, one thing that I sent Kai, I don't know if you got to watch it, but I did send before
I
um
I did.
the music video of November Rain by Guns N' Roses. And I was like, I
Oh,
feel like you need to see this and know what it meant to a generation.
yeah, that was an important one. That you
Yes.
remember like MTV would
It was
have
the best.
their best video ever countdown every year, and it was that or Thriller. I feel like back and forth every
Oh,
year.
for sure. For sure. Like when they did the dance on 13 going on 30, I was like, oh, we already know
Mhm.
this. This is
I still don't understand what exactly happened at that wedding. It just got so out of hand.
I know. And then I was like, did she die? What's happening? But all I knew is that Slash exited at a very small church all of a sudden and
Yeah.
played that guitar solo, which was
It
the coolest thing
was at the
ever.
edge of a mountain.
Yes.
I just read, we can talk about it with the group if we get there. A guy named Alan Niven was the tour manager for Guns N' Roses, and he just wrote a book. And it's really, it's more White Python-esque than I expected. It's hilarious, and they're so childlike in ways that were surprising and really funny.
That's fun.
So
That must make you feel good because you're like, I got it right. If it is
yeah,
feels accurate.
I was surprised how right I got it with them. I mean, with some of the bands, I kind of done enough homework to feel like I understood the lane, but there were a couple really funny things in Alan Niven's book that you could completely see Spencer and Davey doing
Mhm.
that were a lot of fun.
That's amazing. I
I
love
loved
it.
it. It was definitely really fun that, yeah, both Allison and then Elizabeth, our book buyer, who originally found this book, in the catalogs, and just she has a sixth sense about debut authors where she'll pick up
Okay.
a title and, yeah, she'll be like, I know it's not coming out for another 6 to 12 months, but we want to book them. We want to talk
This
to
one
them.
was early.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I was like on it, and she's like, you should give it a read. And she also sent me tons of like random videos and music to listen to. And I was like, Yes, educate me, please. I love it.
So I'm glad to hear that you connected with it, Kai, that you didn't have to be there to get it.
I did. And that's one thing we were talking about earlier in our meeting was just like, I was so surprised by how well I connected to it without the like firsthand knowledge.
Oh, good.
And I so enjoyed this book. It surprised me so much in all the best ways. And I haven't stopped talking about it over the past few days. So definitely
Oh,
excited
I
to
love
kick
it.
off
Thank
this
you.
conversation tonight.
Yes, it was so fun. And it is important that Kai like got into it. And because I was like thinking like who is this book for? And I'm like it's for
Yeah.
everybody. I can't
Yeah.
think of someone it's not for, especially Elizabeth, who is also a Gen Xer, who still even educates me on the 80s. She just loved it so much, and it was really, really fun to
Oh,
get
I love it.
direct for her. Well, we'll go ahead and get officially started since we
Okay.
7:02. Welcome everybody to the Fabled Book Club. We do this every month where we talk with an author about a book that we have chosen. The best part about this book club that is not like other book clubs is we talk about the beginning, the middle, and the end. So there's always my warning to everyone, spoilers abound here. If you've not finished the book, close your computer, come back to it later. We will send you a recording of this about 24 hours after this Zoom has concluded. It will send it through your email, and you can watch it at your leisure. We do not want to spoil anything, but we will be spoiling things if you have not read it. And at the very end, if you stick around, we will be announcing our next book for next month. So I will let Kai officially introduce Travis Kennedy.
Yes, I will just do your formal introduction. Travis Kennedy's work has been featured in the Best New England Crime Stories and Best American Mystery Stories anthologies, Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, and McSweeney's Internet Tendency. He is the grand prize winner of Screencraft's 2021 Cinematic Book Contest for Sharks in the Valley, to be published as Welcome to Redemption. He lives in Scarborough, Maine with his wife and their 2 children, and the Whyte Python World Tour is his debut novel. And I'm also just going to do a brief synopsis of Whyte Python for anybody who maybe read it a couple weeks ago, a month ago, whatever the case may be. But it follows Rikki Thunder, a 22-year-old drummer for the scorching new 80s metal band Whyte Python, who is about to have it all: absurd wealth, global fame, and a dream girlfriend. But an unwitting role as an international spy, that was definitely not part of the plan. This book follows Rikki, his bandmates, and a group of disciplinary unit CIA operatives as they both knowingly and unknowingly try to spread peace, love, and epic shredding across the globe. So our first question for you, Travis, is where did you get this idea? What can you just give us the origin story of this incredible book?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of expected the first question to be, how did you get away with letting someone pay you for this? Every time I hear the description read back to me, I just chuckle that I get to do this. So where did it come from? I started writing this book when I was 8 years old. Alice and I were talking about how this is the era that we were kids in, and I was watching the videos for these bands, for Guns N' Roses and Poison, and they just seemed like these feral Muppets. They were just so funny and zany, and for a little kid, the stuff that they were singing about was mostly going over my head. I just thought that they were like these comic characters, and so they just had stuck in my mind ever since for these sort of entertaining for children, even though we probably shouldn't have been watching their videos.
You
This
should
this
not have been.
uniquely 80s thing, right? Where we were allowed to watch stuff that we probably shouldn't have been, but it imprinted on our brains. So then about 20 years ago, I forget which one's first. It might have been Slash's autobiography that I picked up for the purely the comic elements of life on the road with these people, and I just ended up really kind of getting into the to that genre of autobiography and biography, people who are playing music in these hair bands in the 80s. And yeah, because it was comic, but also there was this undercurrent that I was picking up that is pretty consistent from book to book, which is pretty much every time these guys were broken children. They came from really rough childhoods, and they got kicked out of school and kicked out of their homes, and they didn't really have good jobs or prospects or anything, and the world just saw these losers. But they had this thing that they were really good at. They found music, and through music they found each other, and it unlocked these superpowers in them, and they became larger than life, and they became, worldwide celebrities, and richer than they could have imagined, and all these things they didn't have the tools to deal with, which is where a lot of the comedy and tragedy came from. But I kept seeing that over and over again, that whole idea. It was like the Mighty Ducks. It was like a sports story, these underdogs who found each other, and that idea of people finding each other through the art that they love or the art that they create, and not feeling alone anymore really stuck with me too. And you just kept seeing it. So I had this idea for a few years that I wanted to write a story in that world once I figured it out. And I had this hook that was a little bit different from a behind the music expose, this idea of underdogs. And so then about 5 years ago, I heard a podcast. Many of you may have listened to it, called Wind of Change. It was produced by Patrick Radden Keefe, who's this amazing investigative reporter. He's done a lot of pieces for the New Yorker. He's written books about the Sackler family and about North Ireland. Just an incredible researcher. And he was following this rumor that has existed for decades, that the CIA wrote the song Wind of Change by the Scorpions at the end of the Cold War to help usher the youth of the Eastern Bloc into democracy through the power of soft metal. And it's a really funny concept. Of course, he couldn't prove it because I don't think it's true, but whether it was or not, you're never going to get anyone to admit it if they're not allowed to. But that was the thing I was looking for, was this, what's the hook with this idea I've had forever of these misunderstood underdogs that make amazing spies, because nobody thinks that they're capable of anything, right? They just seem like these shiftless losers who aren't made for this world. But when you read about what their lives were like, and I hope you've all read the book by now, I'm not ruining it for you, but those early chapters where they're living in squalor, they're hustling 12 hours a day to make enough money, to print enough flyers, to hand out enough flyers, to get just enough people in the door. That's what life was like for these guys. They were super hard workers, and they were really creative, and they were capable of a lot of things that people didn't count on for them. So with all that kind of swimming around in my head, and all of a sudden here's this spy story, and that was it. So putting the two things together, the story just poured out, and I knew it was going to be a satire. I knew it was going to be funny, but there's this thread between the rock biography and the spy biography of these underdogs finding their strength with each other, that was just really inspiring to me, that I tried to keep and have it feel truthful, even though a lot of the book is really comic.
I love that. Well, it always reminds me of Jack Black saying that rock and roll is saying stick it to the man, which feels accurate for a revolution too.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So there's a lot of historical context in this, and because growing up as a kid in the 80s, of course, I remember the Cold War being on the news, not having any comprehension really of it. I feel like I've been brought in more education wise by watching The Americans a little bit
Yeah,
on
love it.
TV. Oh, good. But I would love to hear kind of your research in that. Like, how do you unpack such I mean, there's just, where do you stop even with Eastern Bloc, Cold War,
Mhm.
CIA operations,
Yeah.
general suspicion around that time?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of my more thorough research went into life as a musician in the 80s, in particular in metal bands. That was the part that I wanted to get right, because there's so much evidence to it, and people lived it, and people remember it, and people living in that scene remember it. The fun thing about the CIA stuff is I can say whatever I want about them. You'll never get confirmation or denial. So I worked in government for a long time, so I kind of have a sense about how people talk to each other and everything. But how the spy operation works, a lot of that was actually inspired more by cultural artifacts, because I feel like in my mind when I'm reading the book, it's a rock biography with handheld cameras, and then they get off the plane, and all of a sudden it's like widescreen Technicolor, like it's a classic Cold War spy movie. And so I wanted to embrace that sense of like you're entering this world that you know through movies and TV series. And so that's a lot of what inspired the world of the Eastern Bloc and the Cold War at the time. But you know, I mean, of course, I did research. I found old newspaper articles about you know, the little bit of pop culture that made it through at the time, and read some books about life in the Eastern Bloc when the story takes place. It was such an interesting time for the Cold War because it was like you could see that it was almost over. And I remember as a kid, you know, not really watching the news every day, but also not being entirely surprised when the news broke that the wall was coming down, that the Cold War was declared over. That was the feeling that I wanted to capture, which is, you know, we're so close to the end, and this is the thing. This is almost the thinking ahead to when it's over part that the CIA was thinking about. But for the people, for Anya and the people living it, it still felt really scary. And so I was trying to have both the macro view and then when you're spending time with them in that world, it could be still World War II as far as they know they're in danger. Um, but it was really a matter of having the rock stuff feel like real and lived in, and then having the stuff on the back half feeling cinematic.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I agree.
And I think a way that you really pulled that off is through your cast of characters. I mean, I was so impressed with the depth that you gave to each character, both the bandmates and the CIA agents and everyone else. I mean, it was genuinely astounding because it was not too much to where you're like, why am I learning this about this person? But it was just enough to keep you like, oh, I'm now very intrigued in this specific character. But it was every single character. So can you tell us a little bit about your process on how did you kind of come up with your characters, format them, and keep them straight and their specific storyline straight in the way that you did?
Oh yeah, thank you for saying that, Kai, because that's you know, when you're writing a book that has a lot of characters in it, that's a swing, that's a risk. You're asking people to keep a lot of things ordered in their mind, and you might not visit with these people, these characters again for a long time. And so I kind of had this a policy with the characters like Ron and Ben Pratt. And some of these minor characters who are important, but briefly, where so much of that was show, don't tell. Let me give you a sense of who they are by describing them, and you probably know somebody like that enough to have a picture in your mind, and that's all you need. And then it was, you know, for the characters, so you spend more time with the band, the CIA, the CIA team, a little bit of the villains. A lot of that was done through the relentless iteration that comes with writing a book. I mean, the book feels light and fast. That comes from 20 plus drafts. I mean, I worked harder on this than I've worked on anything in my life. And there were times when I felt like I was, you know, I had the story and I felt like I'd completed it, that I said, okay, I'm going to go back and do a buck right now, which doesn't mean I started the book over, but it means I went in and did a revision purely to make Buck feel like he belongs in the story. And then another one where, okay, you know, let's think about Mancuso, and let me think about Mancuso's beginning to end. And I'm going to do a rewrite for Mancuso now. I guess the short answer is you have to care about them enough to do that. And I feel like if I'm creating a character, I owe it to them to make them feel like a lived in real person, to whatever degree they impact the plot or not. And that's, you know, that's me respecting you as my audience to not throw somebody at you and say, this person doesn't matter, but I'm just populating a room here. I had to believe that each person who I threw into the story was going to matter enough that you should remember them.
Mhm. I love that. Even Kevin.
Even Kevin.
Well, I'd love to talk a little bit back to the war about war propaganda, conspiracy theories, and you talked about how you listened to that podcast and kind of pulled out that idea of the was it Scorpion that was doing it?
Scorpions. Yeah.
Scorpion.
Mhm.
Um, in your research, did you ever come across any other conspiracy theories that were related to war in this way? Anything that surprised you?
Oh, there's lots. Yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, if you do check out Patrick's podcast, which I highly recommend, he talks about Nina Simone and Harry Belafonte. I mean, there's a lot of evidence. There's kind of two tracks. There's people like Rikki sort of represents both of them, where there were people who were their material was used heavily as propaganda, whether the band or musicians ever knew about it or not. And that's if you had to make me guess on the Scorpions, that would be my guess. I think the Scorpions wrote that song. I think they believed it. And I think that they were trying to do something unique for them. But I also think that it doesn't get the massive amount of play that it got without maybe some help seeding it, to some degree. So I think that that is a really common, or more common than we know, method of distributing propaganda where, hey, this works. Let's just make sure people hear it. And then there's evidence of people being more directly involved, tours being paid for, and again, to what degree the musicians are totally aware of what they're doing. I don't think Nina Simone or Harry Belafonte would consider themselves loyal CIA assets, but there were places where their music was useful. Yeah, it's one of those things where there's no perfect story like Whyte Python where they went all in, but there's lots of evidence of the power of popular culture products as propaganda in places where you want to bring people into American ideals. And 80s metal,
Mhm.
dumb, loud partying. How could it be more appealing to people who don't get to do that, right? So it makes a lot of sense as a device to get people to say, I want that. I want that life. They're on a beach having fun, and it's so simple and stupid but appealing.
Yes.
Uh,
I was telling Kai because before I read the book and heard it was about conspiracy theories, I thought immediately, and anybody in the chat will have to say if they remember this, about the conspiracy about Phil Collins and his concert. Did you grow up hearing this conspiracy?
Hmm.
I mean, and we believed it that he did that. It was a concert and he caught someone who he saw a murder happen or whatever. Anyways, and of course this was much more heavy than that, but I was just thinking like how funny for another conspiracy theory linked to an artist in that way. Just kind of baffled me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think whenever you have something so big culturally, there's so much space to think about what ifs, and we certainly live in a world now more than ever where um, you might feel suspicious of something popular, or it might be a dividing line between you and somebody else, and so there's just so much space in that world. In my case, to just have fun with it. But definitely it's easy to think of of cultural tools as more nefarious too.
Right. That's so true.
Yeah. Speaking of the fun of the music side of things, I
Mhm.
love that you had a handful of chapters that were written as Rikki Thunder's internal monologue and song.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us a little bit about that? Did you come up with those? Have you ever written lyrics before? How did that happen?
So yeah, I mean, it, I'll back up to answer that question with a question that you might be planning on asking. I usually get asked when I'm talking about the book, which is, why is the format so crazy and weird? And how did I go about deciding to write the book the way I did? Um, I had the idea for the book for a few months before I wrote a word because I was struggling with how to tell it. And I knew that I wanted it to be first person. I knew I wanted to be telling the story through Ricky's eyes, both for that simplicity of it, but also because I wanted it to feel like you're reading a rock biography that just goes off the rails in a way that you weren't expecting. The problem was I also wanted the audience to be in on the joke and to understand what was happening, even when he didn't. And so I kept going back and forth thinking, okay, is it first person and we kind of figure out what's happening, but he's never telling us straight up, or is it third person? And then finally I just decided, you know what, just tell the story however you feel like, chapter by chapter. And that's metal, right? Break all the rules of writing a story. I'm just not going to follow them. And so once I decided to do that, it started flying. And I hit these points where I thought, okay, there are going to be some familiar beats that are unavoidable in a story like this. It's the point. It's supposed to feel like you're watching an 80s movie where like, okay, well, he fell in love, and now we're going to get the music montage. But we also know that she's up to something, so we're gonna catch glimpses of that music montage leading us in different directions. And so I thought, just write the music montage, and then the fun part was thinking about it. Think of like South Park, or there are great movies where they have these really literal soundtracks to what's happening on the screen. And that was what I thought about doing, is just saying, all right, this is Rikki's inner monologue as song. That will get us through this chapter without me telling you a story you've read so many times before. And then it was, I think the fact that I'm not a musician and haven't written lyrics before made it easy, because I also don't know the rules on how to do that either. So I thought, keep it loose, do it fast, and don't give myself a month to write the songs. And so in most cases, the songs were pretty much finished with one draft in about an hour each time. I can hear them in my head. I know just what they sound
I was
like,
going to
which
ask you
helps.
if there is a tune to them in your head.
There's a tune that goes with each one that I can hear. And once I had that tune, it was like, all right, just write rhymes that match that tune, and get it down. And they probably were the fastest parts of the book to write. With the songs, they just poured out.
Uh,
Oh,
I read part of this on audio as I was like
Mhm.
going for a walk,
Yeah.
and one of the chapters that came up was, have you listened to the audio version, and do you think it does justice to those chapters?
I've listened to portions. Writers often say they can't do it. The portions I've listened to are fantastic. It's Will Wheaton. Will Wheaton is amazing.
oh, that's
It
the
was
perfect person for an 80s book for sure.
Yeah, and he's so good. And there were sort of like, I thought, okay, there's 6 or 8 chapters I want to listen to see how he did. I had heard he sang, and I didn't want to hear how he sang because I know it's not going to sound how it sounds to me. He Everything I listened to is fantastic. But I think honestly, what it is more than anything is I've read this book 100 times now. And so the patience of having somebody else read it to me is not something, it's not possible. There's no way I could sit through even the best, most talented guy reading it to read it back to me.
That's
But
so
I've
cool.
heard he sang. So
Oh, that's
I
cool.
hope I
I
hope he
never
did a
realized
good
it was
job.
Will Wheaton. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I found it very entertaining. So yeah, I
Good.
definitely,
Good.
I found myself just like laughing. And one of those moments where you realize you're in public and there's other people around, you're like, oh, I should not be laughing into the ether right now. But he did such a great job on it.
I'm so glad. Everybody has told me the same, that Will just absolutely hit it out of the park, which I'm thrilled about.
That's so cool. Well, the way I had this question already written, and then you said the word, which I was like, oh, I can't wait to ask this question. But when I was reading this, the experiencing reading it feels very visceral, and which makes sense because there's music and sound involved. But it also felt very cinematic. Even when you painted the picture of like, there's a wide shot coming out of the plane, I kept running through movies of that I mean, if I was like, oh, here's like Almost Famous, and then but here's Wayne's
Mhm.
World, like all these different things.
Yeah.
Do you have movies besides music videos that influenced your writing? And is this the way you write as a debut author and will continue to write?
The way that I found my agent was with a book that I wrote just before this one, which we'll publish next, I think. I have a lineup of projects that we're sort of making decisions based in part about film schedules and all of those things. Um, the book that I wrote before this one, as Kai mentioned, won this big contest. I had no representation or anything, and it won a contest called Most Cinematic Book. And I think it's just the way that it's not a conscious thing. Certainly with Whyte Python, writing music montages, I was thinking of it as a movie. I was genuinely thinking you're watching an 80s movie when you're reading it. And that was sort of the lens I was operating from. But I think it's just the way that I write gives people clear pictures in their mind and they can see it playing out. And that's a huge compliment to have people say that to me over and over again with my different work. What inspired this? Yes, I mean, there's certainly Almost Famous and Wayne's World and That Thing You Do with the drummer getting hurt. Top Secret was a movie that I watched 100 times as a kid. That's like, it's an 80s rock Cold War satire is what we're talking about here. Lots of stuff contributed to this one from pop culture. I mean, it's such a pop culture heavy influenced book that, of course, there's a lot of common pop culture stuff that inspired it.
It was so fun. I loved it.
I love it. Speaking of that, you're just queuing us up perfectly for our next questions with some of
Oh,
the
good.
references you're making. Speaking of pop culture, I cannot get through this conversation without bringing up Tawny slash
Yeah.
Amanda Price and the role that she played in the story as the super hot model-esque girlfriend who finds Rikki Thunder and guides him throughout the whole story, some of him knowing about it, some of it unknowingly. And so I wanted to talk about just kind of Ricky's character development through the lens of like having Tawny as the main CIA operative who kind of kicked off this whole thing.
Mhm.
And then also if just dream, just, you know, just a book lover here wondering like in a future book world outside of, you know, the chapters here, would they ever reconnect in real life?
Well, let me give you let me give you a little bit of a hint of an answer to that question, Kai. The original title when I started writing this book was the Whyte Python Reunion Tour, and um, the Adventures in the '80s was a prologue that very quickly blew beyond 100 pages, and I realized this is just the story that I have to write. So I do have lots of ideas about further adventures for the gang in White Python and their friends in the CIA. I can also, say that to you all now, knowing you all have read it and you know that they survive. I've thought about Amanda Price's life outside of her work with Rikki Thunder. She's really important to me. She's more important to me than Rikki in some respects. And um, I think that a story like this, um, it's coded for guys. It tempts a writer to push her into push her into uh, cliches and some sexist tropes. And what I really wanted to do with her was to demonstrate that that stuff is there, but that she is aware of it and taking advantage of it, and that's not who she is at all. Um, I cared about getting her right the most. And part of that is that she's messy. She's a human and she's doing her best and she's struggling with it. And she's not just villainous. She's not just taking advantage of him. She's allowed to have feelings, but she also doesn't throw away the mission over a cute guy, right? I mean, she's a real grown up and she's doing her job the best she can. And she's also human. And I felt like it was important that I make her feel real and feel lived in and not feel like the cliche that you're expecting in a story like this for her to be. I wanted to work around, I wanted to blow that up the best I could without blowing up the world that she's taking advantage of by everybody seeing her that way. So yeah, I mean, I would love to think we'll see her again. I'd like to think we'll see her again, maybe even if Whyte Python's not around. I got a whole other idea for her. I'm really busy. I'm also really fast. And so I have like a lot of projects in the works that are sort of moving at different paces, but there's no way you're not going to see these people again. I care about them too much. And Amanda especially.
That is such great news because I'm very much a token mood reader. And the way that I gauge best if I truly love a book, because just in working in the book industry, you read so many books and titles and you enjoy so many of them and you have the things that you're naturally drawn to. And this one was again like not on my radar until it was put on my radar.
Yeah.
And I coming out of it, I've kept thinking about the characters since I finished it. I was like, this is how I know I absolutely love this book.
Oh,
Like
thank
this
you.
one's gonna stay up there for me. And so I cannot wait to hear some more about Whyte Python, Amanda, and me personally as well. Buck, I have so many questions that I fear will go unanswered for a
There are
long
no
time.
answers.
There are no answers.
I have a follow-up question to what you said, Travis. It's not in our list, but when you were saying like really treating her like a whole person and not a stereotype, did you going about that? I mean, I think it would be really easy to doubt yourself in that. Did you have other readers read her part to kind of vet it as someone who is a person of depth, or did you just trust your instincts of how you would present her?
Well, yeah, I had help. I mean, my wife was one of my first readers of everything I write. So, naturally I got some notes from her. My agent was phenomenally helpful with this book too. She grew up in Southern California. She grew up in LA and she was a teenager in the 80s. This is her era. She loved the story. And I told her, right after she read what was the first draft that she saw, for me it was eighth or ninth, how important it was for me to get Amanda right. And so I think uncommon for agents, we passed seven or eight drafts back and forth between the two of us, and very often they were purely Amanda rewrites and or conversations about her, where we would set aside the rest of the story and say, what was going on with her right now? What was she thinking about? So she was, Ifat Rice Kendall, my agent, was definitely my strongest Amanda whisperer.
That's great.
I love that. I'm curious with again the amount of characters that you have and the different personalities that they all have. I feel like there's kind of a split between like absolutely brilliant CIA operatives and then also just like, yeah, it's just like you're finding the youngest and dumbest people on the planet and you're
Yeah.
matching them together. Did you have a preference of which characters you wrote? Or was your favorite Boone, who was the perfect mixture of both?
Yes, I love Boone. Every time Boone entered the room, I got excited, even though I was writing about him. I just felt like here's this wonderful wild card. Um, uh, I liked writing everybody, and I think that this was a rare case, especially with such a big cast of characters, where there was never a down moment for me where I thought I just got to get through this part so I can get back to the fun. I think, especially for you, the readers, you'll notice that if I'm rushing through the boring stuff to get to the fun stuff. So I did want to think about, okay, it's fun that Mancuso is so boring, and how do I play off him that way with Boone or with Amanda? So he's fun too. So he's part of the adventure. I think that was so much of it, right? Which is the scenario has to be exciting and important or funny for the characters to pop, and that was what guided all of their stories.
That's true. Well, I guess the kind of big reveal of who the mole is was really interesting.
Mhm.
And Kai and I were talking about it this morning because first I would like to always ask, did you always know who the mole would be? And then how do you set it up for the reader not to discover it? Because I was sure it was Buck the whole time
Yeah.
and secret genius. But so I was like just totally surprised. It came out. I would love to hear it in the chat too. If you guys knew who it was from the beginning that Kevin was real,
Yeah, I'd
or
be curious about that.
and that's the point. There's a point where I was like, I think it's Amanda.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, that
I
was
yeah,
part of the fun. You hit that chapter where all of a sudden it looks like it's everybody one after the other. That was that was planned from the beginning, but whether it would be Kevin or not was not. And the funny thing is, Kevin existed in very early drafts purely as Spencer's friend who may or may not be a real person. And then so here's a funny thing about that. There was one line that I pulled out because my my brother is another very early reader, one of the first people who sees everything, and he said it gave it away. And so it was a line where uh, Kirby has brought this world tour to them, and he's listed all of these sort of miserable sounding countries. And Spencer says, "My friend Kevin says Tajikistan is awesome." And so my brother said, "You have to take that out." Because the second I saw that, I knew it was Kevin. And here's the really funny thing about that line. I wrote that before Kevin was the mole. It was just a funny thing that Spencer said. And so, I think it's one of those cases where my brain knew it was Kevin before I did. And so I was filtering in these clues that I didn't even know I was giving myself. So once I figured it out, by the time I hit the back half of the book, I thought, oh, it's fun, it's Kevin. Then of course I went back, that's draft one. I went back through drafts, up through 10 or 12 to give you enough about Kevin to get that it's funny, but also to have it make sense at the end and earn it. And that was also one thing that my editor, Jason Kaufman at Doubleday, cared about. When it got to him, he said, let's make sure we get the mole part right. So there was more finessing with the mole and with the red herrings of all of the CIA members and the band members. He said, like, let's give everybody just one thing about almost everyone. So they're playing this who's the mole game while Kevin is just floating under the radar the whole time.
Well, it cracked me up so much too because I felt like it was a double reveal because also throughout the book I was just so intrigued by the angry German. Like that's how we knew it
Yeah.
was just like this angry German man who exists in the
Mhm.
ether. And so not only was it Kevin, but Kevin was the angry German man.
Yeah.
And it just, yeah, it was one of those like that is the funniest option you could have come up with. And I loved Spencer's line almost directly after they all figured it out of like, you never asked about him.
You never asked about him.
You simply just never asked about him.
What's fun for me is thinking about that angry German saying his name is Kevin and Spencer buying it. Like all of the
Yes.
blanks you fill in on their relationship once you realize what it was, was really fun for me to think about.
So funny. Do
Yeah.
people have a certain person that they thought the mole was, did they tell you? Like a overwhelmingly amount like of people thinking, "Oh, I thought it was this person."
I've been surprised to have some people say that they thought it was Amanda, that I was hiding something about her. That's not, I mean, call me on this years from now after you've hopefully read more of my books. I'm, that's not the way that I write. I try not to intentionally hide the ball on you like that, or give you an unreliable narrator in third person. I don't ever want to do that. So generally, what you're getting with people is supposed to be pretty honest. But in my mind, I thought the one I'm setting up as most likely is Mancuso. Um, and that's the one that I've heard people say, "Oh, I figured it was Mancuso. I thought that's why he was even there." So that would, trick worked. I had some people say Stryker just because we know the least about her and we know that she's keeping an eye on them. But
Or
Mancuso was
Kirby.
sort of it's some Kirby. Somebody actually just said Kirby the other day. A buddy texted me and said, I just figured it was Kirby. So that
So great
the
though.
seeds worked.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was Kirby for most of the way
Oh,
through, just
good.
because
Okay.
again, I was like very early on realized I was like, he's so intentional with these characters, and Kirby is just always there. But I
Yeah.
also still love that he just was there and he hated his job and it just
Yeah.
was part of the thing, you know?
Yep.
I
Yeah. They gave him
also
plenty of reasons.
I also really loved how by the end of the book, how just kind of irritated Ed Lonsa was with the whole thing. He was just I
Yeah.
felt like by the end he was just like, okay, all right.
Yep. Yep. There's his least favorite meeting of the week, and they've become his most important one. So we've all been there, right? That thing at work takes over
Mhm.
your life, and it's the least thing you care about. That's Ed Lons's life.
So funny. Well, you've already answered it a little bit, knowing that we might see some more from Whyte Python and from Amanda Price. But what is kind of next on the radar that you can tell us about your other projects that are coming out, when they come out? How can we keep an eye out for them?
Um, I'm in a very weird place where I'm not sure what I can tell you about. Um, so we are, I've been working with Paramount on developing this as a film. That's moving. So far, we don't have a green light. That's an important term that you might hear a lot, which sort of means the studio has said, we will get the money, plan to start filming, but we're in a phase where we have a second draft of the script ready and it's plugging away. Uh, that book, Welcome to Redemption, that we talked a little bit about earlier. Also in development. I think that's literally all I'm allowed to say, but that's kind of cooking along. And so hopefully you'll see that published in the next year or so. I'm working on sort of a development pitch. This is a cool thing I've learned when you have a good relationship with an editor and your book, you don't have to write a whole new 400-page book to get them to agree to publish it. So I'm working on the follow-up with Doubleday with Jason to Whyte Python, which is not a Whyte Python book, but same tone, same vibe. It should be an enormous amount of fun, but I'm not ready to say anything about it just yet. And I have a couple of original screenplays in development too. So I left my full-time job a couple months ago. I kind of had to, and so this is what I do now. And I'm all in. I mean, I hope to be making lots of stuff for the next several years without slowing down.
Can we ask what your full-time job was?
I worked in government for about 20 years. I worked for the state
In the
legislature
CIA.
for 10, and then I worked for the Senate. I worked for a United States Senator from Maine, a guy named Angus King, for about 5 years. And then I was working for my local county government for about 8 years, just kind of doing special projects and some lobbying, a little bit of everything. And so, a lot of pages of this book were written after my family was asleep. I wrote some early chapters sitting in my daughter's room on my phone because she thought she heard a monster in the closet. So I'm now in this different situation where I can actually sit at my desk in my home office for hours at a time and write, and it's so weirdly luxurious to have the space to do that.
That's amazing. What a flip side to your regular everyday job. Are those
Yeah.
senators like what?
There was
How
a
do
lot of diversity in the work I did, and that's what I feel like I took from it in writing. I mean, it made me resilient as a writer because I had to do it when I found the time, but also so much of work in government. Um, I worked, in politics, but then also in, sort of direct working for the people on stuff that you're paying for it. I work for all of you, and so you never forget that whatever you're doing, you're not the only one in the conversation. If I was writing policy or floor speech or something, that of course I'm thinking about how am I communicating with my audience and making them feel it and understand it and get on the same page with me. But same thing if I'm going in front of a town council saying, we want to change the way that we deliver fire and EMS services together. I can never forget that I'm in this with you and I have to be thinking about what you're taking from it. And I think that really informed my writing, my fiction writing, is never getting stuck up in my own lane and thinking, this is my own adventure. I'm here to give you this story. And so I always have to be thinking about how you're, thinking about taking care of you in that conversation.
That's so great. I love that. Well, as soon as I read your bio and saw that you won that cinematic book award, I just imagined the producers circling you, thinking like, what an easy way to get a great movie. So I know we love embargoed things in the book industry. We deal with them a
Yeah.
lot. But we will be hoping maybe we'll see something familiar on screen at some point from you.
I hope so too. Yeah, it's been exciting. It's been, you go from writing a book which is 100% yours. You've created the entire world, every leaf on every tree, to saying, okay, now we're going to take that story and 100+ different people are going to contribute their own individual piece to it. So it's different, you're bringing in professionals who know how to do things you don't, and you're trusting them to make the part of the film theirs. And so naturally the story has to change for reasons that have to do with storytelling, but also maybe just how can you film it? So it's been exciting to be part of, and it's definitely a much different way to bring something to people when you're doing it by this huge committee.
So cool. Gosh, I have enjoyed this so much, and truly, truly thank you so much
Good.
for your time, Travis. Thank you guys too for joining us. We're going to announce, if you don't mind, Travis, for a few more
Yeah,
seconds,
let her rip.
our next book. Especially if you need anything else to read, I'm going to put it in the chat for anyone here. We'll also put this in the email that will go out tomorrow. That'll include this full recording. And it will allow you to register for that book club in October, and you can buy the book from Fabled, of course. This is exciting to me because this is one that I discovered. This book is called Hazel Says No, and it is a really wonderful book about a senior girl who is propositioned by her principal, who apparently sleeps with a student every year, and she says no. And then it really has to do with the aftermath of that choice. Reading, I think the summary, I kind of was like, oh gosh, I'm just all cringe to what story is about. But it is such an accurate depiction, in my opinion, that I've had teenagers, of what it's like to have a teenager and feel unsure as a parent, and how your choices affect your whole family, how the community reacts to something that is shocking. It is like the perfect book club book. I cannot wait to break it down with our author, Jessica Berger Gross, when we talk to her, just because it is full of really, really interesting discussion tidbits. So love for all of y'all to join us next month and buy the book from Fabled. But
Can I say, Allison,
yeah,
you friendly Texans, that's 2 Mainers in a row you're getting.
well, look at
Jessica
that.
is a Mainer. Her story takes place in Maine.
That's right.
We
Yes.
met at a New England booksellers conference back in the spring, and so tell her I said hi. But yeah, two Maine residents in a
Hi.
row.
Oh, we have a
Yeah.
question from the chat for you, Travis. Does Travis have any book recommendations? That's a great
Oh
question.
boy. I mean, I'm a relentless, constant reader, as probably many of you are. Let me give you a third Mainer. A guy named Ron Curry wrote a book called The Savage Noble Death of Babs Dion. And it's, if you like Dennis Lehane and Don Winslow, that sort of cinematic crime story where it's about a crime story, but it's about a community and it's about culture. A really great. Ron is such a creative writer. A lot of his earlier works was uh, like right out of Kurt Vonnegut's brain. But this is just a great, crime thriller set in Maine by a Maine guy. We get each other's back, Maine artists. So Savage Noble Death of Babs Dion. It's a great book.
Awesome.
So fun.
Great. Well, thank you again for your time, Travis. Truly can't wait to cheer you on, to see the next book, to maybe watch the next movie. But truly, please know you have friends in Texas that are truly championing you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thanks for coming and listening and for reading.
Awesome. Well, you have guys have a great night. Thank you guys.
Bye, guys.